Hello, everyone, and welcome back to today's Training Industry Learning Tech Showcase, Simulations AR and VR, sponsored by UMU, Zenerate, and WhatFix. So I am Liz Spate, the Events Marketing Specialist here at Training Industry, and I'm thrilled to have you with us here today. Again, before we get started, I would like to quickly go over a few housekeeping items to help you interact with our speaker and get the most out of this session. So feel free to continue to use that chat window for any comments and questions. We do have somebody from the UMU team to address those questions while William kind of goes through the demo. So please do not hesitate to plug those questions throughout. We want the session to be as engaging as possible and address all of your pressing questions. And additionally, once this session ends, a brief survey will appear in your browser. Please take a moment to share your feedback on the session and speakers. And all of our sessions are being recorded and archived on trainingindustry.com. And you will receive a follow-up email from us that will include the link to the on-demand program for you to share with your team. Now, if this is your first event, we would love to welcome you. We exist to make connections among learning and development professionals, and we offer tons of resources to support your role in L&D, like live events like today's showcase, as well as through articles on our website, our magazine, conferences, research reports, our membership, and our podcast. We would also love to hear about what you learned from today's session on social media, so please follow us on your favorite platform so we can continue the conversation. And without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce you to our final speaker today. William Rintz is the Global Program Director and AI Solutions at UMU. And with that, William, take it away.
Thank you, Liz. Nice to be here, and thanks for joining, everybody. So today, if you were at the other sessions, you heard about other AI simulations, and AI-powered simulations are essentially trying to solve for the same type of challenge, which is that learner readiness for real work. And here we're talking especially about sales rep readiness is often uneven, or at the very least, it's hard to ensure and demonstrate through, let's call it traditional training. And that's often because learners don't always get enough structured and repeatable opportunities to practice and rehearse real selling situations. And second, their readiness is hard to measure. Lots of teams and trainers still struggle to see or demonstrate to the organization who is truly prepared, where coaching is needed most, and how training actually connects to performance. And third, what we'll focus on is that training is fragmented. And that's why we here are talking about a system. Typically, practice, coaching, and learning content are delivered through separate programs or through different platforms for different teams rather than part of one connected system. And that can be confusing not only for trainers or the talent development team, but also for the learners themselves. And that's where we come in and we can do things that the specialized tools you've learned about in other sessions aren't built exactly for. I'd like to start and kick this off with a question for all of you about the way your organizations currently support sales practice. So to do that, I'd like to invite you to participate in our first poll. To participate, you can participate in a few different ways. You can scan the QR code to join that way, or you can use the link that's provided for you in the chat. And this is simply asking you about the ways your organizations currently support sales practice. Or if you in particular are not focused on sales, what we're talking about is applicable to other types of practice as well. So feel free to answer it with that in mind. So again, you can scan the QR code or use the link that's available in the chat, and we'll give it just a few seconds, a few minutes for people to respond. There we go. I know it takes a little time to get the phone up and the QR code scanned. So a few of the answers we have. What we're curious in learning for the people that are attending today is, do you do traditional role plays in a live environment? Or do you do AI simulations yourself? Do you already have tools for that purpose? Are you doing peer role plays? Just a little sense of where we're coming from here is a helpful starting point. So I know that we only have 6 people so far, and that's okay. I think we'll just take a look at the responses as they've come in. And here We have the most common of the people that have responded, which is peer role plays. I think that's what we see a lot of. Workshop-based practice during live sessions. We have three that have manager-led role plays, and then a little bit less frequently here, call shadowing or review as a form of practice, very little structured practice, and there's one person who does have AI role play or conversation simulation tools. So we'll get one more poll. So for that one, we will invite you to participate one more time. But this is a good sense of where I think actually, even in these small number of responses, mirrors where most organizations are. Kind of a mix of the live role play with some different elements included. So a little bit about who we are before we continue, just very briefly. We are UMU. We're a performance learning company. And for more than 10 years, we've worked with organizations that simply want to drive stronger execution on the job for their employees. What's important here is that our approach is grounded first in learning science. We are forerunners at using technology, including AI, to enable better practice and better performance, not as technology for technology's sake, however. What matters is the learning science behind it. And my goal today is not to show you another AI feature, but to show you a more practical way to build and ensure performance in a full system. So what you see at the top is still how a lot of training works in practice. Lots of content delivery, probably a nice, inspiring sales workshop, maybe a test and a way to record the results. And sometimes that works fine and everyone's happy. That model is not worthless because teams, if we're talking about sales teams, definitely need the product knowledge. They need sales methodology. But learning that still doesn't tell us whether they can handle a tough objection in a real sales call or whether they can adapt their message in a real customer moment, especially if they're talking about a new product that just launched. For example, if they're a medical rep talking to a doctor who's maybe a little prickly or has certain priorities, how do we know they're going to perform if they've only done two role plays in a live session? That role play in a live session is certainly not meaningless, but it doesn't really tell us whether they're going to be equipped to handle that situation in a real scenario. So what we want, even if this graphic is oversimplified, is the model on the bottom. The content is still important, but we want to follow it with practice, feedback, more practice, and more feedback. That's deliberate practice that's goal-oriented. It requires high focus. It offers immediate feedback, and then the opportunity to repeat that practice over and over again, which is just hard to do if you're only having live workshops. And the ideal feedback, the type of feedback, is not just summative that gives a score, but also formative feedback that's meaningful for the learner to reflect on how well they performed. But we know that that practice model is much harder to run consistently and at scale. There's constraints that all of our organizations face. So in one more poll, I'd like to ask you about those types of um, those types of constraints. I actually see some people jumped over to the second question here. So what I'd like to ask you at your organization, whether you're large or small, what are the challenges you have at your organization? Are they constraints of budget or time? Is it a more competitive environment? And again, to participate in this, you can scan the QR code or you can use the link that's going to be available in the chat. And I'll give it probably just 15 seconds or more, and then we'll take a look at those because the reason why we ask this is it's great to talk about a new model or unlimited practice or AI simulations. But if the organization is facing certain constraints, we have to operate within the constraints real organizations have. With those 10 responses, let's take a look at these results. So the question was, what are the greatest challenges affecting your team? And even with the limited number, we have the limited resources to train staff, time, budget, and expertise, followed by the lack of metrics to track the success of a training program, And then some say the platforms and tools are not meeting our needs, which I assume is part of the reason why you're here today. So that's great to know because actually those results, even that number, do mirror and are consistent with what we see more broadly. In the research that we have conducted with the Association for Talent Development on sales enablement, the top barriers were what you shared: limited resources, time, budget, expertise, and also a more competitive environment and the lack of metrics to track success, which trainers, talent development teams are more and more being asked to provide. So your responses in these confirm that it's not just a learning design issue. Teams are obviously trying to build better sales readiness under operational pressure. But if we want a better model, it needs to do a few things at once. It needs to reduce the cost of delivering quality practice and improve visibility into readiness through better metrics. The good news, and some of what you've seen today, is that AI and other technology is making more practice-based models more realistic and accessible for more organizations than it used to be. What's changed is that there are different types of practice that are more accessible. Teams can use coaching tools for feedback, video-based practice for rehearsing and reflecting on their talking points, and role-play chatbots for realistic conversation practice, focusing on the specific stages of the sales process that require most attention. Again, the opportunity is not in using new tools for their own sake. The opportunity is to make practice more available, more repeatable, and more measurable, and to enable the trainers to do more with the resources that they have. And I think here's where there is an important distinction between some of the others at this event and us. There are definitely strong tools in the market for simulations, for role play, and for coaching. But often a question for people like yourselves is, how many separate systems does my team need to manage? And for organizations or training companies that want an integrated approach, UMU can bring content, video practice, AI role play, and metrics into one environment. And that can make adoption much easier for the business, especially when people are overwhelmed by the amount of tools they use. So let me show you one of our tools and then what that looks like in practice, that integrated system. One second here, I need to reshare here to make sure that my audio is set. All right, here we go. So what you see here is our role play chatbot. This is a safe AI-powered arena where reps build the muscle memory they need to succeed in every stage of their sales cycle. And while your scenarios will definitely look different than these, we designed several scenarios in collaboration with real pharmaceutical companies based on their common sales situations. So as a learner, I'm presented with this scenario. The learner is a pharmaceutical medical rep meeting with a senior cardiologist at a large hospital. I know the text is very small here, but in this scenario, their pharma product is already approved. It's known to the doctor, and it's already on the hospital's formulary. So in this scenario, the rep's challenge is not awareness of the product to the doctor, but how to help the doctor adopt the product. So this becomes a very realistic scenario a lot of medical reps face. They need to do more than just deliver information. They need to diagnose the real barrier to adoption. They need to respond thoughtfully, and they need to communicate one clear advantage and move the conversation toward action. So as you watch this, what I'd encourage you to notice is not just the conversation itself, it's a medical rep scenario, but how it's being practiced, and then in the next step, what's being measured. So I'll start my practice here with Dr. Evans, a pragmatic, rational empiricist. He's polite but hard to sway. Dr. Evans, thank you again for your time. I know you're already familiar with product A and that it's now on formulary. So rather than revisit the basics, I wanted to use your time to better understand what has kept it from being used so far in your department.
That's fine. At this point we're really just in an information gathering phase on our side as well. We already have a fairly stable lipid-lowering pathway that works for most of our patients, so there hasn't been a strong driver to change it. Why don't you tell me a bit more about what you're hoping to learn, specifically?
Sure. What I'd love to discuss in practical terms is the type of patient who would be a fit for this product. A patient who has already had a meaningful event history, is adherent or appropriately managed on statin plus ezetimibe, still is not at goal, and has clinical features that tell you that their risk is not hypothetical. So if we defined a subgroup concretely, that's what I'd like to discuss. If we define that subgroup, would it make it easier for you to recognize who belongs in it?
Yes, if we can define a very concrete subgroup, that would be more useful than broad, high-risk labels. Right now, everyone post-ACS or with established atherosclerotic disease just falls into my usual statin plus or minus ezetimibe pathway. And I don't really separate out a product A-type patient. So like, prior MI or stent, on maximally tolerated statin plus ezetimibe for a period of time, and LDL still above a clear threshold, yes. A crisp profile like that would make it easier to at least recognize the candidates. The question for me is whether product A is truly the only realistic way to get that specific group to target.
All right, and just one more interaction here with Dr. Evans. Yeah, thank you for your feedback. I understand that you don't really separate out a product A-type patient now. Where I'd see it is as a decision point option rather than a broad treatment reset. So in practical terms, I'm thinking about the patient who has already gone through the standard oral sequence in an appropriate way. Maybe they have maximally tolerated high-intensity statin, addition of ezetimibe, adequate time on therapy, but they're still above the LDL target with a level of residual cardiovascular risk that keeps the case feeling clinically active rather than stable. Would that type of decision point framing make product A easier to map onto your actual clinical workflow?
Yes, that way of framing it fits better with how I actually make decisions. If you're
All right.
talking
And the
about a very
conversation would, of course, continue with Dr. Evans. The point is not to go through all of the conversation about that particular product, although even though I have no pharmaceutical background through the course of practice, I had to get familiar with how to respond. The point is that after practice, it's a really realistic scenario. Again, we designed these particular scenarios in collaboration with pharmaceutical industry scenarios and their um, and their specific needs. So it's very realistic for what a medical rep in this particular case would face. But here comes the important part for you as the trainer. The practice becomes measurable, right? Especially compared to the types of role plays you might do in a live workshop. This conversation creates structured data. And when you break selling behavior into observable dimensions, you can turn what used to be subjective or really just not measured at all into measurable behavioral evidence of readiness. So what I get, this is from a previous round of practice, is a score, only 51 points out of 100. But on the overall practice and then through a full practice scenario, how well I opened the conversation, how well I did needs discovery, message delivery, objection handling, call to action. All of those get a discrete score because the conversation has given data to actually analyze it. And then for needs discovery, here in my previous practice, I showed awareness of the positioning and attempts to define an appropriate patient profile. But even in the practice that I quickly just did, increasing the use of open-ended specific questions about current practice rather than moving quickly to advocacy statements, I agree that that would be better. So as the learner, I get immediately relevant feedback on how well I performed. And it's not just a mechanical checklist of whether I mentioned a phrase. This evaluation is context sensitive. It takes a look at what I said, how it was said, and when it was said in the flow of the conversation. But it's also useful formatively for the trainer. this is where you have lots of data to see which of your reps or which of your learners is struggling in which areas. And not just for one learner, but you have this across your entire learner portfolio. So you can make interventions based on this data. And then, of course, you have the summative score. And while that seems small, it's a simple but huge difference, especially for sales organizations, but also for other types of training scenarios, like for potential managers. Instead of guessing whether somebody is probably ready to sell a new product or to become a new manager, teams can define what good looks like. They can measure performance against specific dimensions, and then they can see where coaching is actually needed. So the trainer can actually have the data needed to make more targeted interventions. The other key thing, as you can see on the bottom, is practice again. Practice as many times as needed. And salespeople, they're competitive. So if I saw that 51 score, I'm definitely not going to settle for submitting that score and risk being, somewhere in the middle of the pack or probably at the lower end of the pack among my peers. I'm going to want to practice again and again and again. And that practice is actually what leads to better performance. Now, you also might be thinking, okay, this looks great, but maybe you're a one-person, sales, or you're a one-person training organization, or we talked about the constraints that organizations have. So how do you actually create this? And here's how teams can create these experiences quickly. Here you can see some of the common scenarios that we built with the pharma industry, but also common scenarios that are built that apply to really any type of sales scenario. The main stages of the sales process, from needs assessment to value proposition to how to handle objections. And you can create these scenarios with only, you have to provide the context, of course, but you can create these with a few different elements that are important. Very simple criteria. You need to define the situation. This is all about the context, right? So in this scenario, we gave a lot of context about the physician background and what they knew. What's the goal? We want goal-directed practice. That's an element of deliberate practice. So what's the learner trying to achieve? Then who's the counterpart? Who's the person we're talking to? We can change this persona to be many different types of buyers that your sales staff might face and replicate that practice across many different types of personas. So just by practicing with a different type of persona, they can have real meaningful practice that's going to prepare them for many different types of situations. This section is where we can provide more context for the model that's going to help it give the feedback, including things like the message delivery. Like, what does the best way to present this product look like? What are the semantic points? These are not presented to the learners, but they do help with the evaluation process. And you or the organizations you work for know the common objections that salespeople face. You know those better than anyone. And you can determine how the model is going to challenge the salesperson, what objections they face, what are actually the underlying reasons for those objections, and then reference responses. So all of these things are really simple to program. You can have a working scenario within, I'd say, 15 to 20 minutes, and then define the scoring. Here we have the standard elements of the sales process: opening the conversation, needs discovery, and message delivery. But these can be customized and the weighting can be determined by you. So this is a tool that we are really excited to share. But again, we're sharing not just one AI tool. This is part of a connected practice and coaching system. This role play exists within our broader performance learning platform. So it's not just a chatbot. We're not just a chatbot company. This is a practice layer inside a connected learning workflow. So what I'm showing here is our learning platform as if we are a pharmaceutical company. And if I'm a learner and I come to our platform, I can determine different training courses by department. I have my new hire orientation. I have different trainings on different types of medicines here. And as a trainer, you can use our platform to create full training programs. So here we have an example of a program for the launch of a new medicine. It's a fictional medicine called U-Medicine. You can deliver your content, your video, your video content. You can have surveys, infographics, discussions, all the things that are important for you as trainers to not only deliver the content, but to stimulate engagement and interaction. So in this type of flow, multiple practice modes can coexist. Role play, AI video practice, the role play chatbot that we saw, coaching comments, the program content, all of the data is all in one platform. So what matters here is that you don't have to have a product that's just a standalone simulation tool, despite the fact that many of those are very useful and effective. If you want your role play to sit inside a broader learning journey, then this is where you can do this all in one place. AI can handle the repetition and the first line feedback, while here, you as the trainer or the manager can focus on those high value coaching moments. So another thing that I'd like to illustrate, it's kind of a side note, but if you're a trainer or a talent development professional, you probably are thinking, across all of these types of simulation tools, like what's my role in this? Are we just handing off the assessment only to AI? And while AI assessments do have advantages, they're immediate and they are objective. The way that most of our clients use our platform is a mix of both. The AI can handle that scalable feedback, that instant feedback, but the managers or the trainers within the platform can provide targeted feedback on specific elements of, for example, a learner's video submission. And they use the trainers to set the criteria for how all of the scoring is done. The result of using a platform and an integrated system is a training program that's linked to results, and again, not a one-off tool. So if we go back to what an ideal training program looks like with lots of practice, the practice modules can come embedded and integrated into the flow of a larger training program. On the left, you see the example of one of our several chatbot models. On the right, we have our AI video exercise. This is the type of practice where reps record themselves delivering their talking points and are evaluated through AI scoring or through their managers. And so these become the practice elements and the feedback elements of a more effective training. The result of using this is also training that measures readiness. When we have all of these embedded into a full training program, all of the data on how well your potential reps or your current reps are performing is collected. And what that means is that you can do analysis like you see here. This just comes from one of our clients, and it's an example where they were able to identify different types of sales reps, how well they performed within the platform and in real life, and then could create targeted interventions. So for you as the trainer, what this means is that you can determine different groups of learners, how well did they score, where do they need more support, and actually elevate your ability to provide more targeted feedback. It's not a scenario where we feel like AI is eliminating the role of a trainer. It's really enabling you to do more under the constraints that we saw. So again, to recap, what we saw here was our UMU roleplay chatbot. That was one of our powerful AI features. In this case, this is where we delivered that safe AI-powered practice environment where the reps can practice over and over again in scenarios that are realistic to their real work. And you can be confident that they get the type of practice and feedback that's going to make them more effective on their jobs. But this is delivered within our AI-enabled performance learning platform. What we saw with our chatbot is only one of the practice elements that you can deliver as part of an entire training program to achieve the results like you see here. In the case of Bayer, that's more engagement. That also means for some organizations, reduced training costs while getting better results. And while we focused on sales today, one final comment is that our clients use our platform to deliver all types of training, from onboarding to compliance to manager and leadership training and more. So while we focused on sales training here, what you can imagine is how you can do this across your entire organization if you are the type of person who provides training across different departments. Now, thank you for your time, and we'd love to take your questions here with the little bit of time we have left. And as we do that, we'd love for you to schedule a conversation to discuss a trial. So get set up with a chatbot, explore and build scenarios quickly, and see how effective it can be for you. So I invite you to scan that QR code as we're answering questions to set up a conversation and see where we can help. All right, so we have some questions here that I'd love to address. And James says, how do you define a safe environment? Which is a good question. And there's different elements of safety. What we specifically mean here is psychologically safe. This goes into a little bit of the research between what's realistic practice and what's not. So if we compare it to the type of role play practice that's in a live scenario, maybe with peers in front of a group of people, that has its strengths, but also it's not psychologically safe. The safe environment is actually where reps can practice in an environment where they know that they're getting a realistic scenario, but they're actually more likely to be attuned to the situation rather than to the environment around them. So that's one element. I see we have some other questions. I'll probably just answer one more given the time. And it says, what ROI can you demonstrate for your approach? And that's a great question. That's the most important part of everything. Instead of being able to share that in 1 minute, I'd invite you to contact us. We have a large number of case studies. We've worked with organizations, large and small, and we can share a lot of the true ROI and how they're demonstrating ROI internally to their organizations, which is often a big concern with the trainers that we work with. So thanks very much. I see Liz is back here, which means we're probably at time.
We are. William, is there anything else you would like to say with the audience today before we say our goodbyes for the event? Great way to end it.
Yeah, I just say, please. Well, you didn't scan the QR code, or the QR code's no longer up, but I think it's still in the chat where you can schedule a conversation, or you can reach out to me directly, and I'll just put my email here. You can contact me. If you want more of your questions answered that we couldn't handle today, we'd love to schedule that conversation. So thank you, everyone, for your time today.
Beautiful. Thanks, William. And yes, reach out to William. UMU team is amazing, so they will totally address your questions. So I imagine your inbox will be filled after this because there were quite a few questions. So thank you so much, William.
Thank you, Liz.
And as for else, thank you to all of our dynamic speakers and our amazing sponsors, WhatFix, Zenarate, UMU. Thank you so much. And additionally, all of our sessions here are pre-qualified for a credit hour by SHRM, HRCI, ISPI, and CBTM. So please send an email to me or anybody on the TI team, and we will happily send you those codes. Additionally, I would love to meet you all here in person in Raleigh, North Carolina for the 2026 Training Industry Conference and Expo. We do have our early bird sale ending soon. Oh my gosh, March is almost over. So check out that early bird sale before it is too late. And additionally, all of our courses are on sale this month. And if you've been keeping your eye out on one this month, it's finally time to take that step and further your career. So if you are interested in bundling as well, we also have additional options and even bigger discounts. So we have an amazing team who will help guide you pick whatever right course is and whatever course, path you're feeling at that moment. And lastly, that survey will pop open in your browser upon exiting, and we would greatly welcome your feedback. Thank you again for all joining us today. Until next time, I'm Liz. I hope you have a wonderful day, a wonderful week, and I will see you all very soon. Bye, everybody.